Well, hello everyone, I'm Branden Bodendorfer and welcome to the official first recording of Third Thursdays, a podcast that's intended to help motivate you guys into the next month and help accelerate your goals each and every month. Let's talk a little bit about Third Thursdays and what it's going to mean for you and for our audience as we dive into this podcast. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than what you guys originally expect from me when it comes to the traditional videos. Usually, most every video I do, I try to keep it clean. I try to keep any blummers or misfits out of misfits, right? Exactly. That's going to end up in a podcast. That would not end up in the video. We would reshoot that. But the intention here is to be raw and genuine and just share with you thoughts and ideas. But why are we calling it Third Thursdays in the first place? Well, as I looked at this last year and as I've met with many of you, I started to meet with many of you on the third week of the month. And why I did that was for my own scheduling reasons. I just want to help block out a time where I put together as many of my coaching customers in 1 week as possible, just to kind of alleviate some of the pressures in other areas of my monthly schedule. But what I recognized when I did that was many of you people were throughout the month really hitting a lot of your goals. However, some of you just were not really in focus or had things dialed in that you were going to reach the goals and aspirations you had for the month. So a lot of those conversations started to go different directions. With some people, the conversation was about, okay, how are we going to take the next step forward and how can we accelerate our outcomes this month? For other individuals, it was a conversation about pivoting. Is like, okay, what we're doing isn't working, let's find something that does work. And for a handful, it was about really digging in and seeing, hey, we got a week left. What can we do to start hitting some of the things that we want to focus on and hit some of the activities, those opportunities that we've set out in the beginning of the month so that we had success at the end of the month. And I thought about that, and as I did that month 1 and month 2, and we did it in a month 3 and a month 4, and what I found through doing this is that the expectations of what we were able to achieve each month dramatically started to increase. And as I reflected on that, I thought, well, absolutely, because we're taking a moment, we're pausing in the midst of everything. We're looking at our plans for the month, our projects that are on our plate, the tasks that we're trying to complete, and asking ourselves, what are some of the priorities? What are some of the things that we want to accomplish, and what do we have to do different in the last week of the month to really hit the mark? And with Third Thursdays, I thought, wow, it is making a difference. It's making a huge impact. So I wanted to bring that to each and every one of you as part of our customer base so that you guys can hit the mark. But I wanted to do more than just say, hey, everybody take a pause, look at your plans, what things you're getting done, what things you're not getting done, and let's talk about what we can achieve in the last week of the month. No, I wanted it to be a moment, a time where we could pause, reflect, make adjustments, pivot, or change our routines so we could be successful. But in that process, I wanted to give you guys some type of value so that you could chew on a thought or an idea that might improve your process. Now, I thought about doing that in a video and making that a great series and doing all these camera changes and effects and illustrating the planning system. But I thought, you know what? It doesn't feel conversational. It doesn't feel like something that you and I are going to connect on. And the fact that I'm going 4 minutes into this video and we haven't really made a cut yet says something about what this means for me and what my intentions are for you. But with that being said, moving forward, we are going to drop the third Thursday of each month, a video that I want you guys to engage in. Now, this would be something you can listen to on Spotify and all the major podcasting, but you're not going to see the video, which is okay, because I told you just a moment ago, we're not going to focus on a lot of video interactions with the planning system. It's going to be more audio in that sense. I definitely will reference different parts of the planning system that you can look and review on, which I hope will help benefit and lighten your visionary thoughts on the topic that we are discussing. This will also be available on YouTube in a particular playlist that is called Podcasts. Thank you, YouTube, for making it simple. But with that being said, we're going to dive into today's topic of choice, and we're going to talk about the principles of planning and how by setting a guideline, a set of best practices, you can really kind of change the orientation in which you are achieving your goals and how those goal-orientated best practices are going to be applied contextually to different ways you run your life. If it be in projects, if it be in your to-do list, if it be in your interactions, these principles are going to kind of help you kind of bring things into focus. And we're going to jump through a handful of these and we're going to talk about them. I'm going to give you some real life stories on how they affect me, and hopefully we'll go through it. We'll pause, we'll take a break, and I'll let you guys think about those for yourself and use this moment to reflect and get ready to supercharge next week. So let's talk about the first one. The first principle that I like to communicate is setting clear objectives. Planning should begin with a clear understanding of the objectives or goals that we want to achieve. The purpose is to be measurable, have success, be achievable, and relevant to what it is that we're focusing on. So clear objectives, how do we obtain those? We talk about our planning system in a lot of different ways, but each week I ask you guys to go through the weekly plan. It is a getting done method sort of thing where you take a moment, reflect on the week, you organize what you have on your plate, and you bring clarity to what you need to achieve. And if you're looking at that weekly planning tool now, one thing you're going to notice on the right side of the page is the 4 quadrants, where we talk about the things that are critical, things that are not so critical, and the things that are emergencies that need to be get done now versus some things that we have the ability to prioritize and schedule. What I find is when you go through this page, it does a lot of things for you. Not only does it help you set clear objectives, but it helps bring down your anxiety and what it is that you have to focus on for the week, because now you see it in front of you. And when I find that I have kind of developed that plan and I know what my clear objectives are and I know the priority in which I want to achieve them, I have a different sense of how I'm going to impact my week, how I'm going to approach it. And it also helps me have better decision-making process as I'm deciding what events are going to roll out in my week. From time to time, it might even mean looking at some of the events that are already pre-scheduled, like some meetings and appointments, and saying, hey, is that as important as this objective in front of me? And it gives me the opportunity to reschedule and recommit to my goals in front of me. So that is clear objectives, and that is one thing that I feel is a really good practice to have as part of your principles each week. The next one is being realistic. Plans should be realistic in terms of available resources, time, and your capability. Well, I'll give you a life example here. From time to time, my wife and I travel with the kids, I might add, and we'll get to that in a minute. But in that time, she'll often ask me, hey, how long before we reach our destination? Being a guy, I'll take a quick look at the miles that are ahead of us, and I'll do some math based on how I'm driving, and I'll say I'm going to be there in 2 hours and 15 minutes. A few seconds later, my wife may reply saying 2 hours and 15 minutes. Google says it's going to be 2.5 to 2 hours and 45 minutes. In those instances, I wasn't being realistic with myself. And at that same time, what is the effect of not being clear with myself about what I can possibly achieve? So what am I going to do now? Am I going to own it and say, yep, you're right, probably can't get this can't get to this destination in that time? No different than me putting 6 or 7 projects on my plate for the day, knowing quite well I probably can only effectively do 4 to 5 at a pace which gives me the ability to be clear and mentally invested in each one of those products. Now, as I'm driving, I could definitely pick up the pace. I could delay any pit stops, avoid some conversations, and maybe be even a little bit more choosy on how I choose to drive my vehicle. But the reality is I may have created some unfortunate consequences or intentions by not being realistic. And I think that's important because as you're thinking about your plans each week, you want to make sure you're optimistic about planning, but don't disappoint or create failure on what you need to achieve. And that brings me to my next principle of planning, and that is flexibility. One thing that I want to integrate in your guys' scheduling is the ideal week. The ideal week is a place where you take a moment and you look at your schedule and you determine, if I was to have a schedule that was ideal for me, included all of the things I wanted to achieve, but yet maintained a life-work balance mentally, spiritually, physically, and help me gain traction on all the goals I wanted to achieve, what would that week look like? Well, in that week, we can really start to invest our time into a lot of things and not give ourselves the flexibility to take on interruptions or projects that bring us unintentionally off focus. And with flexibility, I like to encourage people to schedule 80-20, meaning schedule 80% of your time, leave 20% of it available. And what this does is by having this flexibility, you can adapt and change to different circumstances that might come in front of you. It also helps you process new information. Sometimes as we're going through a project, or we have a list of tasks in front of us, or we're trying to develop on something, new information might come to us, and we might need to take a few minutes, even a few hours or days, and think about that and think about the effects of that. And with flexibility in our scheduling, we're going to be able to not only be able to adjust, but maintain a focus on what we want to achieve without interrupting the world around us. And I think that's really important, and I think having flexibility is awesome. But what happens if you're one of those individuals, or you have a week where you're just able to achieve it all? Well, that's also what's really cool about the 80-20 rule, is because now as you find pockets of opportunity, you can take steps forward and you can jump into the next things you want to achieve. And that's why having that vision board and having your goals laid out in action steps allows you, when you complete something, you can jump, pull the next task right into your plan and get working on it. So 80-20 can be very rewarding, and flexibility, I think, is a very important part of the principles to planning. The next thing I want to talk to you guys is simply about being efficient, about utilizing your resources and your time, your human capital, without creating any waste. The last thing we want to do is waste time, because when we waste time, or we're not efficient with time, we're really just spending dollars, burning up our time without having some type of output that is beneficial. And this can increase frustrations, it can increase costs on projects, and it can even reduce your revenue opportunities. That is why I think it is so important each day. Simply take 5 minutes every morning, validate your key three, make sure that those are the items that are most important for you to choose that day, but then look at your to-dos. And if you notice in our planning system, there is 2 columns. One column is kind of a status update to say if you're working on it, if it's completed, if you moved it forward, or if you redelegated it. But the second column is kind of left open, and that is for you to experiment with this. You can put in a priority, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, of the to-dos in front of you and how you might go about them. The other thing that I often do is I put a W for if it's an item at work, and H if it's an item at home, but I kind of organize my to-dos based on where the tools that I have in front of me are going to produce the most effective means of getting them to be accomplished. I wouldn't schedule calls in an area where I don't have cell phone service. So I schedule calls at my desk, and I know I have a great opportunity, great resource in front of me to be effectively able to have those calls. So efficiency is, I feel, a big important part of these principles, and that'll roll right into the next bullet point. Understanding and setting priorities. It is so easy to have a list of tasks and to simply go through those lists of tasks without understanding which actions are going to create the best outcomes, which ones are going to have the highest return on your investment. And by taking a few minutes, just like you did in that 5-minute exercise each day, by organizing those tasks in an order of priority, you're going to have better outcomes. Now, I tell everyone to do this each and every day. I also tell them to do it as part of that weekly plan. So as you start to see these principles, they start to kind of come together, right? Some of the principles are overlapping. The tools that we're using are relatively the same, but we're just applying the principles in our thought process. And as we start to look at each of these principles and think about the different things that are on our plate and apply these as principles, it's going to give you clarity to have those clear objectives so you know how to mark and move forward. The next principle is monitoring what you achieved and evaluating what you accomplished. And why this is so important is we want to have a continual process of understanding our performance. Essentially for me, each and every night, I take a few minutes, I look at the things I was able to mark off my plate, and I assess what I need to accomplish in the next day and roll my task from one day to the next. What this does for me is allows me to evaluate how I'm spending my time and change and adapt to my course direction so that I don't drift from what I want to achieve. And I feel this is really important. It should be part of your morning and nightly habits, because by able to make those small adjustments each day, staying on course, keeping things in focus of what you want to accomplish, are going to be important to your overall success each and every month. So as we're sitting here on a third Thursday and we're saying, hey, what do I need to look at for next week? What things that I have strong intentions to do, but maybe how did I drift from what my original intentions were, and what can I do to bring myself back in the right lane to help accomplish them? That is what this time is truly intended for. The next principle is participation and communication. Now, we go back to that driving conversation that we had, and we talk about me setting a deadline that was unrealistic about what we wanted to achieve. It might have created some frustration in the front part of the cabin of the vehicle. You have to remember that you are not the only stakeholder in your goals. There's other players involved. It can be coworkers, it can be relationships, it can be your spouse, it can be teammates, but there's other people that are invested in what you want to accomplish as an organization. It is important to have that communication. So in the event that you kind of come off focus or your goals kind of become unhinged with what you were able to achieve this month, you can have conversation with those stakeholders and say, hey, these are some adjustments we need to make. This is how we're going to pivot. This is where we're going to dig in and focus in the days to come. And today, utilize this time, reach out to those stakeholders, reach out to your colleagues and say, hey, what is the different projects and tasks on our plate? Where is our focus going to be? Where are we going to dig in? And how can we really end this month in a very positive light? And by having that communication, you're going to have involvement. You're going to make the team, the people around you, more informed about what it is that you see as success. And as a community, you're going to find better execution. The next principle is time management. And I am super guilty of this one. As charged, I tell you time and time again that from time to time, I'm sometimes not realistic about what I can accomplish. Well, I'm also not really good at time management. I might find myself going online, doing some research, then get interrupted by an ad. That ad is for a new lens for a camera. And I say, ooh, that looks exciting. Let's go look at that new lens. What can that do for me? I already have 4 lenses that take pictures of birds, but this one, that's a better lens for taking pictures of birds that are 400 feet away versus 500 feet away with the other lens is intended for. The reality is sometimes as we do our planning, we have to understand that there's going to be things that take us off focus. And we talk about flexibility as one of the principles. We talk about the 80-20 rule, and part of that 80-20 rule is making sure you allot time for the other areas of life, as well as allot time for each and every task that you want to complete, and be considerate of potential delays or any risks that you might run into or new information that might come forward. By having that 80-20 rule, not only are you going to be able to properly measure the timelines in front of you, but you're going to reduce any risk or any crises that might come. And through communication and being able to participate with others, you're going to find more success, again, with the things you're able to do. You're starting to see again and again and again how all these principles are kind of rolling together, but that's the idea. When you look at something like a coffee mug, and you look at it from here, and I have this coffee mug just out in front of me, and I can't see the contents of it, but it feels heavy, right? If I turn it around, I see the handle, I look underneath it, I see the bottom, but it isn't until I look overhead that I see that it's half empty. Now, I didn't have any understanding of how full that was when I simply picked it up. Maybe I should have, based on how long I've been drinking out of this mug, but as we look at these principles, it's like looking at this coffee mug at different points of view, at different angles. And it gives us a better assessment, because now my assessment is like, well, the reason why it's heavy, it's actually one of those mugs that helps keep my coffee warm, so that's why it's heavy on the bottom. And yeah, it is nearly empty because I've been drinking on it for a period of time. It's maybe time for a refill or a time for a break from this podcast, which brings us to our commercial break. No, I'm kidding, no commercial break. But these principles are all meant to help you kind of gain perspective on what you're trying to accomplish in different forms of light so that you can make the best decisions, which brings us to the next principle, simplicity. Sometimes the best solution for planning is to keep it simple. And what I mean by that is when you look at your goals and you look at your daily key 3, what are the things that are going to give you the best outcome, and what are the steps that are going to make it the easiest and most simple to achieve? If you can get something done in 1 call, why make it 3? If you can have a discussion about a project over a lunch hour or a short meeting, Why schedule it for a half hour or hour? That'll help you with your time management. Take a moment and think about those tasks, those meetings, those projects, and keep it simple. That brings us to our last principle, and one that I truly stand behind, and that is sustainability. What is so important about this, if you haven't already read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, I talk about it a number of times on my videos. He talks about the importance of making small changes, 1% adjustments in what you want to achieve week in and week out. And through that, you're going to make some huge gains over time. And by having a long-term focus in creating a schedule and having a weekly plan for yourself, you're going to have a long-term impact on what it is you're able to achieve. And you're not only going to see the growth from the actions today, but you're going to see the growth in the future of all the actions that you are completing as they multiply your success. As we look at these principles, it builds a framework for not only effective planning across all the different domains, but I hope for you that it gains a sense of focus and clarity and gives you a wise thought on how you're going to schedule the rest of your month. Third Thursday, people, it is today. I want you to take a few moments to look at your schedule, look at your intentions for the month, and say, how can I end this month on a high? The game isn't over. It's only the fourth quarter. And if you're a Vikings fan or a Packers fan, they blew it in the first and second quarter. But you today can achieve success before the clock runs out. Third Thursday, I'm out.